The charity banquet was a glittering cage. 1,000 crystal shards of light reflected off champagne flutes and jewels, each one a tiny mockery of the life I thought I had. Elias Thorne, my husband of 3 years, guided me through the throng with a hand on the small of my back. His touch, once electric, now felt like a claim of ownership. My heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. Tonight he had told me he would make an important announcement. After years of standing in his shadow, supporting him as he built his empire from ruins, was it finally my time to step into the light? Was he finally going to acknowledge us? We reached the center of the hall. The spotlight was blinding. Elias took the microphone, his voice, smooth and commanding, echoing through the sudden hush. "Thank you all for gracing us with your presence tonight. Your generosity will, as always, change lives." He smiled, a practiced, perfect curve of his lips that never quite reached his eyes. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second I saw something in his gaze. A veil, a shadow, that made my stomach clench. "Everyone here knows," he continued, his tone dripping with false warmth, "that my wife, Kira, has been my steadfast supporter, the silent force behind my success." A wave of warm applause washed over me. I forced a smile, my cheeks aching. "And tonight," Elias said, his voice dropping into a more somber, theatrical register, "she will once again prove the depth of her selfless nature." I blinked, my smile faltering. Selfless nature? What was he talking about? "A dear old friend of mine," Elias announced, his gaze sweeping the crowd, "is facing a life-threatening crisis. She needs a healthy kidney to survive." The air in my lungs turned to ice. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. "And after extensive testing," he said, his eyes finally locking back onto mine, holding me prisoner in that blinding light, "we have found that Kira is a perfect match." The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. The cacophony of the crowd faded into a high-pitched whine. I felt the blood drain from my face, a wave of dizziness so violent I took an involuntary step back. This wasn't an announcement of our partnership. This was a public execution of our marriage. "Elias," I whispered, my voice a broken thing lost in the vast room. "What are you saying?" He ignored me, speaking again into the microphone as if I hadn't made a sound. "As the centerpiece of this charity gala, I am announcing that Kira Thorne will be donating a kidney to Miss Celeste Dubois. The surgery is scheduled for next Monday." The room erupted. Not in horror but in admiring applause. They thought it was a grand romantic gesture. They saw a devoted wife saving her husband's dear friend. They didn't see the trap snapping shut. I found my voice, sharp and laced with a panic I could no longer contain. "Elias, are you insane? You want me to donate a kidney to Celeste?" His gaze turned to me, and the last vestiges of the man I loved vanished, replaced by a chilling, impersonal coldness. "This isn't a discussion, Kira. It's a notice." "I refuse." The words tore from me. "What right do you have to decide what happens to my body?" His eyes narrowed, sharp and cruel. "Every right. You're just her substitute." The words were a physical blow, a sharp knife plunged straight into my heart. I knew about Celeste, the ghost who haunted our marriage, the first love he could never forget. But to hear him say it so callously, so publicly, the pain was so acute it was almost paralyzing. "So for 3 years, I breathed, the truth a bitter poison on my tongue, that's all I've been? A placeholder." He didn't deny it. His silence was more devastating than any confirmation. It was an admission of 3 years of lies. As if on cue, Celeste herself glided onto the stage, frail and ethereal in a white gown. She looked like an angel. I saw the healthy glow beneath her carefully applied pale makeup, the strength in her slender frame. "Elias, please," she demurred, her voice a soft, melodic lie. "If Kira isn't willing, we mustn't force her. I can wait for another donor. The doctors say I might not have the month, but I'll be brave." A perfect performance. I saw right through it. "You don't look like someone who's dying," I stated, my voice cold and flat. A flicker of panic, quickly masked, flashed in her eyes before she melted back into a picture of wounded fragility. Elias moved to her side, taking her hand protectively, his gaze on me full of contempt. "Kira, you have no choice. Pack your things. You're checking into the hospital tomorrow for the pre-op workup." This was it. The end of the road. I looked at the man I had loved, the man I had sacrificed everything for, and saw a stranger, A beautiful, cruel monster. I had one last card to play, a secret I had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. A secret that was now my only shield. I met his gaze directly, pouring every ounce of my remaining strength into my voice. I can't have the surgery, Elias. I'm pregnant. A dead silence fell over the banquet hall. The air grew thick and heavy. Elias's expression froze. For a heartbeat I saw something, shock, maybe even a flicker of something resembling humanity, cross his face. Then it was gone, replaced by a colder, harder resolve. Even better, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. That child should never have existed in the first place. And with those words he utterly and completely destroyed me. The last flicker of hope inside me guttered and died. The love, the pain, the betrayal, it all crystallized into a single cold point of resolve. Elias, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You are truly a devil. I turned and ran. I shoved through the crowd of stunned socialites, their faces a blur of shock and morbid curiosity. I heard Elias's furious roar behind me, the commotion as he gave chase, but it was all white noise. I had one goal, one escape. I burst out onto the deck, the cold sea air a slap in the face. The wind whipped my hair and dress, the black, churning water below looking like oblivion itself. He caught up to me, his hand grabbing my arm, spinning me around. Kira, come back here this instant. I wrenched my arm free, backing toward the railing. I looked at him, at this beautiful, broken man who held my heart captive, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty desolation. Elias, I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the wind. Did you ever love me? Even for a single moment? His expression wavered, a crack in the ice. For a fleeting second I saw a war within him. But it was snuffed out as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold certainty I had come to know. It doesn't matter, he stated. The only reason you exist in my life is for her. I laughed then, a dry, desolate sound that was carried away by the wind. Celeste had followed us out, her face a mask of fake concern. Kira, don't be foolish. Please come away from there. Elias is just worried about me. Shut up. I snapped, my voice sharp as a blade. Do you really think I can't see through your little act? You're not sick at all, are you? Her face paled. She looked at Elias in a perfect pantomime of fear. Elias, she's hysterical. Elias took a step closer, his hand outstretched as if to calm a wild animal. Kira, stop this ridiculous scene right now. I looked at him, at her, at the glittering prison of the yacht behind them. I thought of the life growing inside me, a life he had just condemned. I took a deep, shuddering breath, filling my lungs with the salty air for the last time. Elias Thorne, I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying over the waves. Falling in love with you was the biggest mistake of my life. And with that I let go of the railing. I leaned back into nothingness, a final act of defiance. His scream, no, was the last thing I heard, a raw, heart-wrenching sound of utter horror, before the icy black sea swallowed me whole. The cold was a shock that stole my breath. The darkness was absolute. As I sank, the weight of my dress pulling me down, one thought burned brighter than the panic, more potent than the cold. If I survive this, I will make you both pay. The world was a symphony of pain and pressure. Icy darkness pressed in on all sides, a crushing weight that stole the breath from my lungs and the warmth from my bones. The luxurious gown Elias had chosen for me became a death shroud, its heavy fabric pulling me deeper into the abyss. His scream, that final, shattered, no, echoed in my mind, a ghostly counterpoint to the roaring silence of the deep. I had chosen this. It was not a surrender but a gambit. A final, desperate act of agency in a world where he had stripped me of all choice. My hands instinctively cradled my abdomen, a protective gesture against the cold, against him. I'm sorry, I thought, to the tiny spark of life within me, a life he had deemed unworthy. I'm so sorry. Then a new pressure. Not the crushing weight of water but the firm grip of hands. Strong arms wrapped around me, fighting the drag of the sea and my sodden clothes. I was hauled upward, breaking the surface into the chaotic noise of wind, waves, and shouting voices. I choked, salt water burning my throat and lungs, my body convulsing with the shock of air and cold. I was dragged onto the deck of a smaller, faster boat than Elias's ostentatious yacht. Figures moved around me, wrapping me in rough, warm blankets. My vision swam, blurring the faces of my rescuers into anonymous shapes. "Get us out of here now," a voice commanded, deep and calm amidst the chaos. It was a voice that brooked no argument. I was carried below deck, laid on a bunk, and the boat's engine roared to life, cutting through the water away from the fading lights of the gala. Shivering uncontrollably, I finally focused on the man who had given the order. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the low light. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build, and his face was all sharp angles and focused intensity. His eyes, a startling shade of cool gray, watched me with an unnerving blend of clinical assessment and something else. Something like recognition. Who are you?" I managed to stammer through chattering teeth. "My name is Cashion Vale," he said, his voice as calm as it had been on deck. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the bunk to look at me more directly. "And you're Kira Thorne. Or you were." The use of the past tense was deliberate. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. He knew. He knew exactly who I was and what I had just escaped. "How?" "It doesn't matter how," he interrupted, his tone not unkind but firm. "What matters is that you are alive. The question is, what do you want to do with that life now?" The reality of my situation crashed down on me harder than the ocean waves. I was free of Elias, but I was also utterly alone. I had nothing. No money, no identity, no future. Just a searing hatred and a desperate need to protect the child I carried. "I want him to pay," I whispered, the words raw with a venom that surprised even me. "I want them both to pay." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Cashion's lips. It wasn't cruel, it was satisfied. Good. That single word sealed a pact between us. I didn't know his motives then, only that his goals, for whatever reason, aligned with my own. The next few days were a blur of safe houses and hushed conversations. Cashion was the CEO of a rival pharmaceutical empire, Vale Therapeutics. He was Elias's most formidable business opponent, a fact I had been vaguely aware of but had never dwelled on. Now it became the cornerstone of my new existence. Cashion laid out his plan with cold, brutal efficiency. The world would believe Kira Thorne was dead, lost to the merciless sea. In her place, a new woman would be forged. He would provide everything. A new identity, resources, education, protection. In return, I would become his ultimate weapon against Elias Thorne. "The child?" I asked, my hand once again resting on my stomach, my greatest vulnerability and my newest source of strength. "Will be protected," Cashion stated. "He or she will be the heir to nothing Thorne has built, but the foundation of everything you will destroy him with." The first test came a week later. Racked with morning sickness and crippling anxiety, I lay on an examination table in a private clinic Cashion owned. The ultrasound gel was cold on my skin. I held my breath, terrified that the trauma of that night, the icy water, the sheer terror had been too much. Then a sound filled the room, a rapid rhythmic swooshing like the gallop of a tiny horse. The technician smiled. "There's the heartbeat. Strong and healthy." A sob escaped me, not of sadness but of profound, overwhelming relief. My child had survived. We had survived. In that moment, my resolve hardened into something unbreakable, a diamond forged in the pressures of betrayal and loss. This child was mine, not his. And I would build a world for us where Elias Thorne was nothing but a bad memory. The years that followed were a period of intense metamorphosis. Cashion was a harsh but brilliant mentor. I was moved to Paris, then Milan, immersed in the world of high fashion and jewelry design under a new name, Elias. It was a world far removed from the corporate shadow I had lived in with Elias, a world where I could create beauty instead of navigating his cutthroat deals. Cashion believed revenge was an art best served with exquisite taste and impeccable style. I gave birth to a son. I named him Leo for the lion, for the courage he had given me just by existing. He had my eyes, but heartbreakingly, a certain stubborn set to his jaw that was all Elias. I loved him with a ferocity that scared me. He was my reason. Cashion was a constant, enigmatic presence. He provided a fortress of security around us, the best nannies, the finest tutors. He was unfailingly generous but emotionally distant. Our relationship was a complex web of mutual need. My need for vengeance and security, his for a tool to break his rival. Yet sometimes I would catch him watching Leo with a strange, almost wistful expression that I couldn't decipher. I asked him once point blank, "Why are you doing this?" Why help me destroy him? His gray eyes had grown cold and distant. Because Elias Thorne and his family represent a poison. They take what they want and destroy what they don't understand. Their legacy is one of cruelty masked as ambition. That is all you need to know. It was an unsatisfying answer, but I sensed a deep personal wound beneath his words and knew better than to pry. We were allies, not confidants. Under the tutelage of masters in Europe, I flourished. The pain, the anger, the love for my son, I channeled it all into my art. My debut collection, titled Phoenix, was a critical sensation. It was dark, elegant, and powerful. Pieces crafted from onyx, reclaimed silver, and diamonds that looked like shards of ice. It was my story told in metal and gemstone. Ilara, the mysterious new designer, became a name whispered with anticipation. Throughout it all, I watched Elias from afar. Cashion provided me with updates. The news reported my death as a tragic accident. There was a massive public funeral. Elias played the grieving widower perfectly, his face a mask of grim sorrow on every magazine cover. Not long after, he was publicly linked again to Celeste Duboces. The narrative was being written. The heartbroken tycoon finding solace with his ailing first love. Made me sick. 5 years to the day after I leaped from that yacht, I stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror in a penthouse suite overlooking the city I had fled. I barely recognized the woman staring back. My hair was shorter, styled in a sharp modern cut and dyed a deep auburn. My posture was different, confident, poised. My eyes, once full of naive love, were now cool and assessing. I wore a gown of my own design, a blood-red sheath that screamed power and defiance. Leo, now a vibrant, curious 4-year-old, ran into the room chased by his nanny. "Mommy, you look like a princess." I knelt, pulling him into a tight hug, breathing in his sweet, innocent scent. "Thank you, my little lion. Be good for Marie tonight." Cashion entered, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo. He looked at me, and for a fraction of a second, his usual detached expression flickered with something akin to admiration. "Ready, Ilara?" he asked, offering his arm. I took it, my grip firm. The International Chamber of Commerce banquet. Elias would be there. It was the perfect stage for my return. "Ready," I said, my voice steady. "The performance begins tonight." The car ride was silent. My heart was no longer a frantic bird. It was a steady, determined drumbeat. We arrived at the glittering venue, a place so reminiscent of the night that shattered my life. I took a deep breath, the scent of perfume and ambition filling my lungs. Cashion leaned close, his voice a whisper. "Remember who you are. You are not his victim. You are his reckoning." I nodded slightly, a cold smile touching my lips. After 5 long years, the curtain was about to rise. We entered the banquet hall. The air hummed with power and privilege. And then I saw him. Elias Thorne. He stood across the room holding a glass of whiskey, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago, maybe even more polished, more arrogantly sure of his place in the world. Celeste was draped on his arm, looking perfectly healthy and utterly vapid. A wave of pure, undiluted hatred washed over me, so potent it was a physical taste in my mouth. But I didn't falter. I smoothed my expression into one of polite indifference. I took a glass of champagne from a waiter's tray and began to move through the crowd, a splash of defiant red in a sea of black and navy. I calculated my path, timing it perfectly. Just as I was about to pass him, I deliberately stepped on the hem of my own gown. I stumbled, a graceful, calculated falter. A waiter nearby caught my arm. "Are you okay, ma'am?" The commotion was small but enough. It drew the attention of everyone nearby, including Elias. I straightened up, offering the waiter a grateful, dazzling smile. "Thank you. I'm quite all right." And then I turned and my eyes met his. Elias's pupils constricted. The glass in his hand dipped, whiskey sloshing dangerously close to the rim. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. He stared, his eyes raking over my face, searching for a flaw, a crack in the facade, desperate to prove his eyes were deceiving him. I let him look. I let him see the woman I had become, the ghost he could not categorize. He broke away from Celeste and walked toward me, his steps measured but his composure clearly shaken. He stopped before me, his gaze intense, bewildered. "Sir," I said, my voice a cool, polished instrument I had spent years perfecting. "Do we know each other?" He struggled to find words. "Hello," he finally managed, his voice strained. I'm Elias Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries. I offered a faint, polite smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Thorne. I've long heard of you. I'm Alara. I let the name hang in the air between us. As if on cue, Cashion was at my side, taking my arm with a possessiveness that was part of our act. I leaned into him affectionately. This is my husband, I said, the lie feeling sweet on my tongue. Cashion Vale. Cashion extended his hand calmly. President Thorne. A pleasure. Elias looked from me to Cashion, his mind visibly reeling. The moment their palms touched, I saw Elias's hand tremble slightly. A thrill of pure, undiluted satisfaction shot through me. President Thorne, I said, my tone dismissive yet polite. We have another engagement to attend. You'll excuse us. As I turned to leave on Cashion's arm, Elias suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. His touch was electric, familiar, and repulsive. Miss Alara, he said, his voice low and urgent. Do you have another name? Kira. I gently but firmly withdrew my hand from his grasp, my skin crawling where he had touched me. Mr. Thorne, I said, layering my voice with a hint of amused pity. I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else. I've been living abroad and only returned this month. And without giving him a chance to respond, I turned and walked away with Cashion, leaving Elias Thorne standing alone, utterly and completely destabilized, his gaze burning a hole in my back. The first move was mine. And I had checkmated him before the game had even officially begun. The rest of the banquet was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I moved through the crowd with Cashion, a dazzling, untouchable duo. I laughed at the right moments, discussed art and finance with ease, and accepted compliments on my design work with a graceful humility I had practiced for years. But my entire being was hyper-aware of one thing: Elias Thorne's gaze. It was a physical weight, a laser of confusion, desire, and dawning horror that followed me from across the room. I could feel him trying to reconcile the ghost of his meek, love-struck wife with the formidable, enigmatic woman who stood beside his greatest rival. I made sure to give him plenty to look at. I leaned close to Cashion, whispering things that made him smile, a rare, genuine-looking expression I knew would infuriate Elias. I let my hand rest on Cashion's arm, a casual intimacy that spoke of a shared life, a shared bed. Cashion played his part flawlessly. He was the picture of proud possession, his gray eyes occasionally flicking toward Elias with a look of cool triumph. The message was clear. What you threw away I have claimed and polished into a jewel. As the evening wore on, the tension became a palpable thing. Elias tried to engage others in conversation, but his attention was fractured, his eyes constantly searching for me. He was unmoored, and the sight fed the cold, hungry thing that had grown inside me over the past 5 years. The grand finale of our performance arrived just as the banquet was nearing its end. The side door of the hall opened and a small figure darted through the crowd. My heart, which had been beating a steady, controlled rhythm of revenge, suddenly swelled with a love so fierce it almost brought me to my knees. Leo, my beautiful boy, ran straight toward me, his little legs pumping, his face alight. Mommy! I bent down and scooped him into my arms, burying my face in his soft hair for a second to compose myself. When I looked up, I made sure my gaze found Elias's. His eyes were wide, locked on the child in my arms. He saw the dark hair, the familiar shape of the eyes. He was doing the math, his face a canvas of shock and a terrible, dawning realization. I pressed a kiss to Leo's cheek, a smile of pure maternal affection on my lips. A smile I knew Elias had never seen, had never inspired. The contrast was devastating. I was not the broken woman he'd driven to suicide. I was a mother, a success, a wife to another man. I was everything he had lost. Cashion smoothly intervened, taking Leo's hand. Time to go, little man. Let's let mommy finish her work. They melted back into the crowd, leaving me to deliver the final blow. I turned a final, indifferent smile toward a group of socialites and made my exit, feeling Elias's stunned gaze following me until the very last second. Outside, the cool night air was a relief. Cashion's black sedan idled at the curb. Just as we were about to get in, Elias came running out of the banquet hall, his tie slightly askew, his composure finally completely shattered. Miss Alara. We need to talk. His voice was nearly a shout, raw with a desperation that was music to my ears. The car window slid down silently, revealing my profile, cool and impassive. President Thorne? What can I do for you? My tone was that of a busy woman mildly inconvenienced by a persistent fan. He leaned down, his hands braced on the car door, his face pale. That child, is he? Cashion from the driver's seat didn't even look at him. President Thorne, you seem unusually interested in my son. The word might hit its mark. Elias's face darkened instantly, a storm of jealousy and confusion. I allowed a mocking smile to touch my lips. President Thorne, I said, my voice dripping with false politeness. If there's nothing else, we really must be going. I didn't wait for a response. The window glided up, cutting off his anguished expression, and the car pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted glass, I saw him standing on the sidewalk, his figure growing smaller, a man utterly alone in the night, his chest heaving as if a boulder were crushing it. Cashion glanced at me through the rearview mirror. The plan is proceeding smoothly. He's already begun to suspect Leo's origins. In the back seat, Leo was already nodding off, exhausted by his brief starring role. I stroked his hair, a flicker of complex emotion, guilt for using him, fear for his safety, overwhelming love, passing through me. Yes, I whispered, more to myself than to Cashion. So smoothly it almost makes me uneasy. Don't worry, Cashion's voice was gentle yet firm. No matter what happens, I'll always be by your side. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the seat, the words a comfort and a complication. The gears of revenge were turning, and there was no stopping them now. The next phase began immediately. As we had anticipated, Elias, desperate for any thread to pull, intentionally invested in my jewelry brand. He needed access, excuses to be near me, to study me. The signing meeting was held in my studio, a bright, airy space that was my sanctuary. He arrived looking like he hadn't slept. I greeted him with a professional smile, extending my hand. Mr. Thorne. I didn't expect a titan of industry like yourself to be interested in jewelry. Our hands touched. A brief electric contact. I could feel the nervous energy humming through him. His light-colored eyes were intent, searching. Miss Alara, he said, his voice a low murmur. I'm very interested in the design concept behind your Rebirth series. For a split second my mask almost slipped. The Rebirth series was my Phoenix collection renamed for the domestic market. It was my story, my pain, my resurrection, etched in silver and stone. He knew. He was letting me know that he knew. I recovered instantly, my smile never wavering. The Rebirth series was created after I experienced a major life change. It explores the relationship between destruction and renewal. He leaned forward, his gaze uncomfortably intense. Could you elaborate on what kind of changes occurred? I maintained a polite, distant expression. Personal reasons. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to discuss in detail. For the next half hour, we danced around the possibility of collaboration. His eyes kept drifting to my right wrist, to the space where a long faded scar from a childhood accident should have been. I had had it lasered away years ago. He was hunting for proof, for any slip that would confirm I was his Kira. After the contract was signed, he made his move. Miss Alara, would you be interested in having dinner with me? To discuss synergies. I gave a light, dismissive laugh. Sorry, I have to pick up my son from kindergarten later. Perhaps another time. I saw the mention of my son hit him like a physical blow. How old is your son? He asked, trying to sound casual and failing utterly. I paused, as if considering whether to share such personal information. Then I softened my expression, allowing a glimpse of the mother beneath the ice queen. He's 4 years old. The number hung in the air between us. The math was perfect. The blood drained from his face. As I gathered my things to leave, I caught a glimpse of him in my peripheral vision. He had lowered his head, his expression a complex tapestry of agony, regret, and a desperate, possessive hope. The hook was set. Now we just had to let him run with it. The next morning I was in my studio sketching when Cashion arrived. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He took the bait, he said, a spark of excitement in his cool gray eyes. Elias went to Leo's kindergarten. He had someone acquire the straw Leo used at lunch. I set down my pencil, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The fish wasn't just nibbling, it was swallowing the hook whole. And the arrangements? All made, Cashion nodded. The sample he gets will confirm exactly what he wants to believe. The paternity test will show a 99.8% probability that he is the father. The following day, I took Leo to the city's largest amusement park. It was a bright, sunny day and his joy was infectious. For a few hours I almost forgot about the darkness that drove me. We rode the carousel, ate ice cream, and I watched him run through the splash pad, his laughter echoing. And through it all I felt it, the persistent, unwavering gaze from the shadows. He was there watching us, watching his son. I could feel his yearning, his torment. It was everything I had wanted. I curled my lips into a faint, unseen smile. The hunter thought he was stalking his prey. He didn't realize he was walking directly into a snare. The confrontation came as we were leaving, Leo sleepy and content in my arms. Elias stepped out from behind a concession stand, blocking our path. He looked ravaged, his eyes burning with a chaotic mix of emotions. "Kira," he said, the name a raw accusation. I feigned shock, pulling Leo closer. "Mr. Thorne. You're frightening us." "Stop pretending," he snarled, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. His voice was low and dangerous. "I know everything. The paternity test doesn't lie. Leo is my son. You're Kira. You didn't die." My performance was award-worthy. My face paled. My voice trembled with a rage that was only partially feigned. "Elias, you did a paternity test on my son? How dare you?" He let out a cold, bitter laugh. "How dare I? You disappeared with my son for 5 years and you ask how I dare." Leo, stirred by the tension, looked at Elias curiously. "Mommy, who is that angry uncle?" I shielded him behind me, my body a protective wall. "He's no one important, sweetheart." I turned my fury back on Elias. "You truly are a piece of work. 5 years ago, you were the one who said this child should never have existed." Elias's eyes rimmed with a faint redness. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, broken need. "So you admit it. You are Kira." I didn't answer. Instead, I shot him a look of pure contempt, gathered a now frightened Leo into my arms, and hurried toward the parking lot. He followed, dogging my steps. "Kira, wait. Do you have any idea how long I've looked for you? All these years." I whirled around to face him, the parking lot empty around us. "Looked for me?" I sneered. "Were you looking for me, or were you looking for my kidney?" A flicker of genuine panic flashed in his eyes. "Kira, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off, my voice sharp as a blade. "Explain how you needed my kidney for your precious Celeste? Or explain how inconvenient it's been for you these past 5 years without your convenient stand-in." "I'm sorry, Kira," he whispered, the words staggering out of him. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse. I was wrong. The apology I had craved for so long felt like ash in my mouth. It was too little, 5 years too late. I sneered. "Your apology is worthless. It doesn't even begin to touch the pain you caused me." And then, to my utter astonishment, his legs gave way. He didn't just slump. He crumpled, falling to his knees on the dirty asphalt of the parking lot. The great Elias Thorne was on his knees before me. "Kira." His voice was a broken tremor. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But please just let me speak." I was momentarily stunned into silence. The aloof, self-possessed titan of industry was prostrate, utterly defeated. I looked down at him, this man who had held the power of life and death over me, and felt a surge of intoxicating power. I softened my expression for Leo's sake. "Leo, darling, get in the car first. Mommy needs to talk to the man." Leo, wide-eyed but obedient, nodded and climbed into his car seat. I closed the door, leaving us alone. Elias trembled as he pulled a small, familiar book from his inner pocket. My diary. The one I'd kept during our early years together. I'd thought it lost when I fled. His voice was fragmented, choked with emotion. I read it. Every page. You recorded every day we were together. The small things, the way I took my coffee, the book I was reading. You saw me, and I never truly saw you. He tried to reach out to touch the hem of my dress, but his hand shook so violently he pulled it back. I was blind. My vision was clouded by an obsession. I mistook my fixation on Celeste for love, and I didn't realize that true love had always been right in front of me. The words were everything I had once dreamed of hearing. Now they were just tools. I let them hang in the air for a moment, Then I leaned down and slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed in the quiet lot. Elias, I said, my voice cold and flat. The damage is done. What's the point of all this now? Do you think a few sweet words will make me forget what you did? He desperately clutched at my leg, sobbing uncontrollably now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He kept repeating it, a broken mantra. I watched him, this man who had once been a god in my eyes, now reduced to a weeping wreck at my feet. A confident, cruel smile curled my lips. I was winning. Get up, Elias. He slowly released his grip but remained kneeling as if he lacked the strength to stand. These past 5 years, I've lived a life worse than death. Drowning in regret every single day. Now that I know you're alive, that we have a child, his voice broke. Kira, I don't dare ask for much. Just let me see him. Occasionally. Let me fulfill some fatherly duties. I looked down at him, the flames of my anger burning bright and clean. Elias, I said, my voice dripping with finality. You don't deserve it. I turned my back on him, got into my car and started the engine without a second glance. As I drove away, I saw him in the rearview mirror, still kneeling on the asphalt, his body racked with sobs. A smile, cold and meaningful, played on my lips. His humiliation was complete. His pain was exquisite. But it was only the beginning. My appearance, my survival, was a stone thrown into the stagnant pond of Elias's world. And the ripples did not take long to reach the shore where Celeste Dubois had built her fragile, fraudulent kingdom. My return made her restless. I could feel it, a shift in the air, a tightening of the invisible strings she used to puppeteer Elias. It was only a matter of time before the serpent left its nest to confront the perceived threat. She came to my studio 3 days after my parking lot confrontation with Elias. I was expecting her. The door opened and she glided in, a vision of calculated elegance in a cream-colored sheath dress. She looked healthy, vibrant, a far cry from the dying waif she'd pretended to be 5 years ago. She made herself at home on my white sofa, crossing her legs with a languid, proprietary air. She looked around the studio, her gaze dismissive, before it finally landed on me. A slow, condescending smile spread across her perfectly painted lips. Well, well, she purred, her voice like poisoned honey. If it isn't Kira Thorne. Back from the dead after 5 years. My. What a miraculous recovery. I didn't rise to the bait. I remained at my drafting table, a pencil poised in my hand, my expression one of bored indifference. I came back, I said, my voice flat, to find the right moment to take your worthless life. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. She was good, I'd give her that. I heard you even brought back a little bastard. How quaint. The word bastard ignited a fire in my veins. My fingers tightened around my pencil, my nails digging into my palm. The audacity of this woman to come into my space, to flaunt her superiority after what she'd done. It took every ounce of my willpower not to launch myself across the room and scratch her eyes out. Before I could even formulate a response, she stood and strode over to me, her perfume, a cloying, expensive scent, filling the space between us. Do you really think playing dead for 5 years and now swanning back in with a child will win Elias's heart back? She asked, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just gloating. This was fear. She saw my return, my son, as a threat to her carefully constructed reality. He was here to intimidate me, to scare me off. The realization was like a cool balm on my fury. I had the upper hand and she knew it. I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. Since you care so much about Elias, I said, my tone dripping with false sweetness, why don't we let him come and take you away himself? I picked up my phone from the desk. Her eyes followed my movement, a flicker of panic breaking through her mask. I dialed Elias's private number. It connected on the second ring. Elias, I said, my voice calm and clear. Your first love is causing a scene in my studio. She's being rather unpleasant. Please come and handle your problem. I heard his sharp intake of breath on the other end. Kira, I'm on my way. I ended the call before he could say another word. Celeste's face had turned a deathly pale. She made an aborted movement to snatch the phone, her fingers freezing mid-air. She took several steps back, recomposing her expression into one of wounded dignity. Do you think this means you've won, Kira? she hissed, her composure cracking. You're so naive. I remained silent, letting her unravel. Elias only feels guilty toward you right now, she raised her voice, the shrillness betraying her fear. Once he comes to his senses, he'll realize who the right person for him truly is. As if on cue, the studio door flew open. Elias stood there, his face a storm cloud. Celeste. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. What are you doing here? Her transformation was instantaneous. Her shoulders slumped, her lower lip trembled, and her eyes welled up with perfectly timed tears. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I just heard that Kira was back, Elias, she said, her voice a fragile whisper. I wanted to see her, to welcome her home. But she seems to have some misunderstanding about me. I couldn't help it. A light, incredulous laugh escaped me. Misunderstanding. I shook my head. There's no misunderstanding, Elias. It's just that Miss Dubois seems to have an issue with mine and Leo's existence. Since you're here, perhaps you could remove this lunatic from my premises. If she dares to show her face here again, I added, my gaze locking with hers, don't force me to slap the pretense right off of it. Elias's gaze darkened, shifting uneasily between the two of us. I could see the war within him, the old programming to protect Celeste and the new desperate need to appease me. He let out a long, weary sigh. Let's go, Celeste, he said, his voice tired. She glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, but in front of Elias she maintained her elegant facade. Of course, Kira, she said, her tone sickly sweet. Let's have a proper chat another day when you're feeling less emotional. She swept out of the studio, taking Elias's arm possessively. He cast one last, conflicted look at me over his shoulder before the door closed behind them. I stood alone in the sudden quiet, the ghost of her perfume still hanging in the air. Men, I thought with a fresh wave of contempt. The more manipulative the woman, the more they love her. A new, more intricate plan began to form in my mind. I really want to know, Elias, I mused. When push comes to shove, who will you choose? Your son? Or this scheming viper? I didn't have to wait long for her counterattack. 3 days later, my world was rocked again, but this time digitally. It started with a single anonymous post on a popular gossip forum. Then another. And another. They spread like a virus across social media. The posts accused Elias, the new jewelry designer, of being a fraud. They said I had faked my death for a massive insurance payout. They called me a homewrecker who had seduced a wealthy businessman, Cashion, while still married to another. And they savagely attacked Leo, calling him an illegitimate child, a bastard born of an affair. The comment sections became a sewer of vitriol. My studio's official website was flooded with hateful messages. The phone began ringing off the hook with reporters demanding comments. The most devastating blow came when several clients who had initially agreed to collaborations and commissions called, their voices dripping with polite embarrassment, to cancel their contracts. My reputation, so carefully built, was being torn down in a matter of hours. The final straw came when I went to pick up Leo from kindergarten. His teacher, a usually warm woman named Ms. Evans, approached me with a strained expression. Ms. Vale, she began, hesitating. I'm so sorry to bring this up, but some of the other parents have expressed concerns. Concerns? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. About Leo's background, she whispered, unable to meet my eyes. With all these rumors online, they're worried about the influence. Rage, cold and pure, washed over me. They were targeting my son. They were trying to make a 4-year-old child a pariah. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice dropping to a low, frigid register. What my son's background has to do with anyone is none of their business. Perhaps they should focus on bossing around their own children instead of flapping their gossiping mouths about things they don't understand. I took Leo's hand and marched out of the school, my head held high, but inside, I was trembling with a fury I hadn't felt since the night on the yacht. I went straight to Cashion's office at Vale Therapeutics. He was already on the phone, his face grim. He hung up as I entered. You've seen it, I stated, my voice tight. The entire city has seen it, he replied, gesturing to his computer monitor filled with hateful headlines. Could this be Elias? A clumsy attempt to drive you back to him by destroying your new life. I shook my head, the certainty cold in my gut. No. This is too petty, too vicious. This has Celeste Dubois written all over it. Cashion gave me a long measuring look. Then we end it. Now. He turned to his computer. I'll have my PR team draft a statement. I'll announce on the company's official website and every social media platform that you are my wife. That Leo is my son, legally adopted and loved. That will dispel the rumors instantly. I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly buckled my knees. Thank you, Cashion. He nodded, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. It's the truth that matters. We will simply expedite its announcement. Within the hour, a formal, legally vetted statement was released from the office of Cashion Vale, CEO. It was a masterpiece of brevity and power. It confirmed our marriage, praised my talent, and formally announced that Leo Vale was our beloved son, and that any further defamatory statements would be met with immediate and severe legal action. The effect was instantaneous. The tide began to turn. The cancellations stopped. The hateful comments were drowned out by messages of support. As Cashion finished posting the announcement, my phone rang. It was Elias. Kira. His voice was strained, urgent. We need to talk. I looked at Cashion. He's calling. Cashion's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. Time for the first round of direct confrontation. I'll drive you to the studio. The ride was silent. When we pulled up, Elias was already there waiting by the entrance. He held a thick manila folder in his hand. When he saw me emerge from the passenger seat not alone, but with Cashion by my side, his expression darkened abruptly. Kira, he said, his voice tight. Can I talk to you? Alone. I glanced at Cashion, then back to Elias. He's not an outsider. A dark undercurrent of displeasure surged in Elias's eyes. He thrust the folder toward me. It was her. All of it. Celeste. I just found out. She hired a PR firm to orchestrate the entire smear campaign. I didn't take the folder. I just looked at him, my expression icy. So, you're here to apologize on her behalf? I'm here to help you, he insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. I will compensate you for every loss she caused you. Every cancelled contract, every dollar of damage. Cashion, who had been standing silently beside me, suddenly laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. President Thorne, do we look like people who need your petty compensation? If you really want to help, he said, stepping forward, his gray eyes glinting, you should make the one who started this pay the price. Not just throw money around to try and silence the problem you helped create. Elias glared at Cashion, his face livid with a jealousy he could no longer contain. President Vale, he spat, since when did you develop a hobby of raising another man's child? The air went cold. Cashion didn't flinch. He smiled, a slow, smug, infuriating smile. Whoever the child and the mother recognize as the father, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, is the father. President Thorne, who the hell do you think you are? Then he winked at me. It was a signal. A move we hadn't planned, but one I instantly understood. I didn't hesitate. I stood on my toes, cupped Cashion's face with both my hands, and pressed my lips to his in a deep, possessive and very public kiss. It was a performance. A weapon. But as my lips met his, I felt something unexpected. A jolt, a current that was far more than just acting. Cashion's hands came up to my waist, pulling me closer, and for a breathtaking second the world, Elias, the revenge, the pain, all faded away. There was only the surprising warmth of his mouth and the solid strength of his body against mine. We broke apart. I was breathless, my heart hammering for a completely different reason. Cashion's cheeks were flushed a deep crimson, his gray eyes dark with an emotion I couldn't name. Elias stood frozen, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His face was a mask of furious, impotent agony. I found my voice, layering it with a casual indifference that belied my racing heart. Mr. Thorne, my husband and I have other matters to attend to. We won't be keeping you. Cashion took my hand at just the right moment, his gaze exceptionally tender. As we passed by the statue-like Elias, a carefree, uninhibited smile spread across Cashion's face, a final brutal twist of the knife. Back inside the studio, the door closed, shutting out the world. I noticed the deep blush still staining Cashion's cheeks. I feel like he might have intentions towards me beyond just cooperation, I said, trying to break the strange tension that had settled between us. Cashion looked at me, his expression unreadable. Is there something on my face? I averted my gaze, suddenly unable to look at him. Nothing. I was just thinking about a question. What's the problem? His voice was soft. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind back to the cold calculus of revenge. My voice was calm and firm when I spoke. Cashion, you said if I took all the Dubois family's business, how long could they last? A slow, meaningful smile spread across Cashion's face. It was the smile of a predator. With me involved, he said. The Dubois family will be bankrupt within 3 days. The kiss hung in the air between Cashion and me, a charged, unspoken thing. The studio felt too small, the air too thin. I could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips on mine, the surprising warmth, the solidity of his grip on my waist. It had been a move, a piece on the chessboard, but it had felt disconcertingly real. Cashion cleared his throat, the faint blush still visible on his neck. He straightened his tie, a gesture so uncharacteristically nervous it made my own heart stutter. "I'll make the calls," he said, his voice slightly husky. He turned and left the studio, leaving me alone with the ghost of the kiss and the cold, settling certainty of my next move. I had given the order. Bankrupt the Dubois family. 3 days. That was all Cashion had said it would take. I believed him. The Dubois fortune was old but brittle, built on legacy and reputation rather than innovation. Celeste's father was a dinosaur, stubborn and proud, who had refused to adapt to the modern economic landscape. Their company, Dubois Manufacturing, was a house of cards. Cashion Vale, with his cutting-edge pharmaceutical empire and ruthless business acumen, was a hurricane. I didn't leave the studio for those 3 days. I watched the financial news networks with a detached fascination. It began subtly. A rumor here about liquidity issues. A questioned investment there. Then the avalanche started. Vale Therapeutics abruptly cancelled a long-standing lucrative supply contract with Dubois Manufacturing. The news alone sent their stock into a downward spiral. Then a major bank called in a significant loan. A loan that, it was mysteriously revealed, had been based on inflated asset reports that Cashion's people had uncovered. By the afternoon of the second day, Dubois stock had plummeted by 50%. I sat on my white sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, watching the numbers fall on the screen. It was like watching a building being demolished in slow motion. There was no joy in it, not exactly. It was a cold, clinical satisfaction. This was the cost of crossing me. This was the price for targeting my son. On the morning of the third day, the news broke. Dubois Manufacturing was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The stock, once a proud blue chip, was virtually worthless, down over 80%. The house of cards had collapsed. The door to my studio flew open. Elias stood there, his face as dark as a thundercloud. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually immaculate appearance frayed at the edges. I was on the floor with Leo, helping him with a puzzle. I didn't look up. "Kira," he bit out, his voice strained. "We need to talk." I finished helping Leo place a piece, then gently patted his head. "Sweetheart, why don't you go show Marie your finished puzzle in the other room?" My assistant, understanding the tension, quickly ushered a confused Leo away. I stood up slowly, brushing non-existent lint from my trousers, and moved to sit on the sofa. I left him standing. "President Thorne," I said, my tone cool and formal. "If you're here to plead for Celeste, save your breath." "Remy," he exploded, using my old name like a weapon. "Don't you think you've gone too far? The Dubois family's decades of foundation. You teamed up with that Vale to destroy it in just a few days." I finally looked at him. My gaze was flat, devoid of emotion. Compared to Celeste spreading rumors online that I'm a mistress and calling my 4-year-old son an illegitimate bastard, I think I've been more than merciful. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. "Or have you forgotten, Elias, that Leo is also your son?" "She's already deleted those comments," he shot back, raising his voice. "She lost control of her emotions. She was scared. Why do you have to be so ruthless?" The justification, the immediate leap to her defense, was like a splash of cold water. It was just like 5 years ago. Nothing had truly changed. He was still firmly, blindly on her side. A bitter, incredulous laugh almost escaped me. "Does deleting the comments erase the harm she caused?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Does it unsay the words she used to describe your child? Does it give me back my clients? My reputation?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of utter frustration. What exactly do you want, Kira? I want her to make a public, formal apology. I want her to admit in front of everyone that she spread those lies. Impossible, he scoffed. She's too proud for that. I cut him off with a sharp wave of my hand. Then there's nothing left to discuss. You must have heard about Cashion Vale's business tactics. He's not a man who stops halfway. At the mention of Cashion's name, Elias's expression visibly twisted, contorted by a jealousy so pure it was almost pathetic. What exactly is your relationship with him? He demanded, taking a step closer. I paused, letting him stew in his suspicion. Him, I said finally. Of course he's my husband. The father of my son. It was a lie, but it was my truth now. The one I wielded. Elias's eyes dimmed. He took another step closer, invading my space. You've been married for years, yet you're often apart. He never attends your events. And now he suddenly goes to such lengths for you. Does that make sense to you, Kira? His voice was low, insidious. Mr. Vale seems unusually concerned with my marital status, I retorted, meeting his gaze without flinching. One might think you're jealous. Kira, don't be a fool, he snapped. Don't let yourself be used without realizing it. What kind of man is Silas Gu? Would he help you for no reason? At least he actually helped me, I fired back, the words lashing out like a whip. And what about you? What did you do when your beloved Celeste spread her rumors and slandered me? Nothing. You did absolutely nothing. Elias was speechless. A trace of shame, of embarrassed realization flashed in his eyes. He had no defense. I pressed my advantage. If you really want to help Celeste, why don't you go talk to Cashion? See if he's as easy to deal with as I am. You've changed, he whispered, staring at me as if seeing a stranger. His voice was low, almost awed. The old you wouldn't be so cold. I let out a soft, bitter laugh that held a universe of pain. People change, Elias. Especially when they've been shattered and had to put themselves back together alone. He fell silent, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension of what he had truly lost. At that very moment his phone rang, shattering the tense quiet. He fumbled for it, putting it to his ear. Even from where I sat I could hear the hysterical, screaming crying on the other end. Celeste. Elias's face paled. Elias. Dad was taken away. The tax bureau, they just showed up with a warrant. They're auditing the books, they're saying he's suspected of major tax evasion. It was Vale. I know it was him. He's destroying us. Elias listened, his hand trembling. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange, conflicting mix of reproach and a bizarre, desperate expectation, as if waiting for me to fix it, to call off my hound. You, he stammered into the phone, his eyes still locked on mine. You just stood by and watched this happen? I looked back at him, my expression one of pure, unadulterated speechlessness. What else was I supposed to do, Elias? Send a fruit basket? His face collapsed. The last vestige of hope died in his eyes. He turned away from me, his shoulders slumping. I'm on my way, he muttered into the phone and hung up. He didn't look at me again. His eyes were dark, hollow. President Thorne, I said, my voice dripping with false politeness. Don't waste your time here. He walked out of my studio, his figure utterly dejected, a king watching his entire world burn. The door clicked shut behind him. I was alone. The silence was deafening. I picked up my own phone and opened it. There was a single message from Cashion. It contained only 2 words. It's done. A slow, sinister smile spread across my lips, a smile that felt both foreign and right on my face. The Duboces family was finished. Their fortune was ashes. Celeste's kingdom of lies was rubble. I looked out the window at the city skyline, at the building where Thorne Industries stood tall and proud. You're next, Elias, I thought, the cold certainty settling in my bones. And now for the final test. The choice I've been waiting for. Between your son and your precious Celeste. Who will you choose? The plan was already forming, intricate and cruel. It was time to play my most devastating card. It was time to use the one thing he now believed was his. It was time to use Leo. The hospital corridor was long, sterile and endlessly white. I paced outside the designated VIP ward, my steps silent on the polished linoleum. I had rehearsed this moment, but now that it was here, A genuine maternal terror threatened to choke me. I was about to use my child's well-being as a weapon. The guilt was a sharp stone in my throat. The elevator doors dinged open. Elias appeared, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. He'd come immediately after my frantic, tear-filled phone call. "Kira," he asked, striding toward me. "What's wrong? Why are you at the hospital?" I turned to him, and I didn't have to fake the pallor of my skin or the tremor in my hands. The fear was real. I wrapped my arms around myself, making my voice small, broken, almost inaudible. "It's Leo," I whispered, the name catching on a sob. Elias's expression changed instantly. The corporate titan vanished, replaced by something raw and panicked. "Leo? What's wrong with Leo?" I let the tears fall then. They were real tears, born of the horrific scenario I was enacting. "Elias, he has leukemia." The word hung in the sterile air, devastating and final. Elias recoiled as if struck. His face lost all its color. "What? How could this happen?" I broke down then, the sobs racking my body. I wasn't entirely acting. The mere thought of anything happening to Leo was enough to unleash a torrent of genuine terror. "I don't know. He was so tired, he had a fever that wouldn't break. They ran tests." I grabbed the front of his shirt, my knuckles white. "Elias, please, you have to save him. The doctor said he needs a bone marrow transplant. Both Cashion and we failed the matching test. You're his last hope." I looked up at him, letting him see the utter desperation in my eyes. "Please, Elias. I'll do anything. I'll go away, I'll never bother you again, just please, get tested. If you can save him, I'd trade my life for his." The words were a vow. And in that moment they were true. Elias's face crumpled. He pulled me into an embrace, his own body shaking. "Of course," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course I will. I'll do it right now. I'll do anything." He went for the test immediately. The days of waiting for the results were an agony of a different kind. Elias practically moved into the hospital. He spent hours by Leo's bedside, reading to him, playing quiet games. He looked at our son with a wonder and a fear I had never seen in him before. He seemed to genuinely care more than I had ever imagined he could. It unnerved me. This was not part of the script. He was supposed to be the villain, monolithically cruel. This tenderness, this vulnerability, was a complication I hadn't anticipated. On the morning of the third day, the doctor came in with the results. His face was grave. My heart plummeted. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm so sorry. Your matching was unsuccessful." The words were a death sentence. Elias swayed on his feet. I sank into a chair, my legs giving way, a cry of despair escaping my lips. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was the worst possible outcome. My plan was in ruins. The despair I felt was terrifyingly real. Just as we were sinking into that abyss of shared, genuine despair, an unexpected person appeared in the doorway. Celeste. She was impeccably dressed, her hair and makeup perfect, her body emanating a faint, expensive perfume. The bankruptcy of her family clearly hadn't affected her personal aesthetic. But then, with Elias by her side, she would always land on her feet. "Elias," she said, her voice a gentle, concerned murmur. She glided into the room, ignoring me completely. "I heard about the child. Is there anything I can do to help?" I looked up, a pathetic, weeping mess on the chair. An idea, a desperate, cruel, brilliant idea shot into my mind. The final piece of the trap. I launched myself from the chair and fell to my knees before her, clutching her hands. "Miss Duboces, would you be willing to get tested? For a match? You're our only hope." Her face instantly turned deathly pale. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the sheer horror at the thought of any personal discomfort. She hadn't meant her offer of help at all. It was just another performance for Elias's benefit. She stammered, glancing wildly at Elias. "Leo and we aren't blood related. The chances are so slim, right?" I persisted, pouring every ounce of my manufactured desperation into my voice. "But what if it works? What if you're the only one who can save him?" Elias was watching her, his eyes pleading. "Celeste," he said, his voice soft. "Please." She was trapped. She couldn't refuse in front of him without revealing her true, selfish nature. She forced a stiff, brittle smile. All right then, she said, the words clearly tasting like ash in her mouth. I allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to curl my lips as the nurse led her away. They didn't see it. When prey delivers itself to your doorstep, I thought, the cold strategist taking over once more. How can you not take the kill? 4 days later, the doctor returned, holding a new chart. He looked astonished. It's incredible, he exclaimed. A 90% match. It's practically perfect. My legs gave way. This time I didn't have to act. I fell to my knees before Celeste, who stood there looking horrified. Miss Duboces, I begged, the words tearing from my throat. Please save my son. Celeste remained silent, her gaze shifting to Elias. It was a silent plea for him to save her from this. Elias looked at me, kneeling on the cold hospital floor, and his eyes were full of pity. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, silently approving my plea. Celeste's eyes welled up with tears. Now they were real. Elias, she whispered, her voice trembling. I want to donate, I do, but my health, you know how fragile I am. Elias frowned, a flicker of impatience crossing his face for the first time. He interrupted her. Celeste, save my son. His voice held a new, steely authority. As long as you promise to save him, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. I promise. It was the offer she had always wanted. A lifetime guarantee of his devotion, his wealth, his protection. She looked from his determined face to my pathetic form on the floor. She saw her victory. She nodded, a single sharp movement. Okay. I bowed my head as if in overwhelming gratitude. Yes, I thought, a silent scream of triumph in my mind. Yes. They had all walked right into my snare. They had all become my prey. The promise hung in the sterile hospital air, a transaction sealed in desperation and manipulation. Elias had traded his future for a chance at his son's. Celeste had traded a piece of herself for a lifetime of security. And I had orchestrated it all from my knees. The days leading up to the surgery were a masterclass in tense, silent warfare. Elias was a constant presence, his focus entirely on Leo. He read him stories with a tenderness that felt both alien and unsettlingly genuine. He'd look at me sometimes, his eyes full of a shared, desperate hope that made my skin crawl. He believed we were in this together, united by the potential tragedy facing our child. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Celeste, on the other hand, was moved into a private suite down the hall. She played the reluctant martyr to perfection. She complained of phantom pains, of dizziness, of a crushing fatigue. Nurses attended to her with a reverence usually reserved for actual saints. She'd give me these tiny victorious smiles when Elias wasn't looking, as if to say, see? He's mine. Even in your son's tragedy I win. I played my part, the grateful, terrified mother. I brought her magazines I knew she'd hate. I fluffed her pillows with a deference that made my stomach turn. I was the picture of humble supplication. But on the inside I was counting down the hours. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The perfect, pristine lie was about to collide with the messy, painful truth. The morning of the surgery, the hospital was a study in controlled chaos. Leo, confused but brave in his little hospital gown, was prepped in his room. I had spent the previous hour whispering the truth to him, a necessary evil to ensure his performance. Remember, my little lion, I'd murmured, holding his small face in my hands. This is a very important game. The doctors are going to give you a special sleepy medicine, and when you wake up you'll get all the ice cream you want. But you have to be very, very quiet and still until then. Can you do that for Mommy? He'd nodded, his eyes wide and serious. Is it a secret game? The most secret game, I'd confirmed, my heart breaking even as I hardened it. And you're the hero. He was wheeled away to the operating room and the real performance began. We waited in the designated family room, Elias pacing like a caged animal, me sitting statue still, clutching a tissue I didn't need, and Cashion, a silent, imposing sentinel in the corner, having arrived to support his family. His presence was a cold reminder to Elias of the life I had built without him. The clock ticked past the scheduled start time. Then 15 minutes. Then 30. A nurse came in, her face apologetic. There's a slight delay, she said. Miss Duboces is experiencing some preoperative anxiety. The surgical team is speaking with her. Elias stopped pacing, his face a mask of frustration. What? Where is she? She's still in her suite, Mr. Thorne. She's refusing to come to the pre-op area. Without a word, Elias stormed out of the room. Cashion and I exchanged a glance. This was it. The moment of truth. We followed him, a silent procession of doom, to Celeste's suite. The door was ajar. We could hear her voice, shrill and panicked, from within. Won't do it. I already said I won't donate. The child isn't mine. Why should I have to sacrifice myself? Elias threw the door open. She was standing by the window, dressed in her street clothes, her hair disheveled. She looked like a cornered animal. Celeste, Elias's voice was a low, dangerous growl. What is the meaning of this? They're waiting for you. Leo is waiting for you. She turned on him, her eyes wild. You promised. So what? The law doesn't say I have to donate bone marrow. You can't force me. This was my cue. I rushed forward, the perfect picture of a mother on the verge of shattering. I fell to my knees before her, a move that was becoming a habit, and grasped her hands. They were cold and trembling. Miss Duboces, please, I begged, letting real tears stream down my face. This time they were tears of rage. I'm begging you. Save my son. Otherwise he will die. He will die. She looked down at me, and for a split second I saw not fear, but a glint of pure, unadulterated hatred. She wrenched her hands away. Get away from me, you pathetic creature, she spat. Then her gaze shifted to Elias, and her voice took on a mocking, hysterical edge. Remy, when you were destroying my family, did you ever imagine you'd be on your knees begging me for anything? I didn't have to act. The words were a slap. I knelt there, letting the insult hang in the air, letting Elias absorb her cruelty. I'm sorry, I whispered, the picture of broken humility. It's all my fault. I admit it. As long as you save Leo, I'll give you everything I have. All my property, my designs. Everything. Elias stepped forward and pulled me to my feet. His touch was gentle, but his eyes, when they landed on Celeste, were burning with a fury I had never seen before. Celeste Duboces, he said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. You will donate. Whether you want to or not. A wave of genuine fear washed over her pale face. The script was flipping and she didn't know her lines. Elias? What do you mean? If you refuse to donate, he said, each word a hammer blow, I will make everything you currently possess vanish overnight. Your apartment, your accounts, the clothes on your back. I will ruin you so completely you'll wish you had never been born. You're threatening me, she gasped, her hand flying to her throat. No, he corrected, his voice ice cold. I'm saving my son. The shift in power was electric. Elias was no longer her protector. He was her judge and executioner. She was seeing the man I had always known was hidden beneath the obsession. Ruthless, decisive, and terrifying when crossed. It was then that she noticed me. She saw the look on my face. It wasn't the look of a begging, broken woman. It was the look of a victor watching her plan unfold perfectly. A slow, dawning horror spread across her features. Remy, she whispered, her eyes widening in shock as the pieces finally, horrifyingly, clicked into place. Does he not actually have leukemia? Her voice rose to a shriek. You made me get tested on purpose. This is all to get back at me. I instantly, frantically grabbed Elias's arm, my face a mask of innocent shock and hurt. Elias. She's gone mad. How could I possibly joke about something like this? Our son is dying. A shadow of deep displeasure crossed Elias's brow. He was too far gone in his paternal panic, too committed to saving Leo, to entertain her accusations. Celeste, you have no choice. He waved his hand. Two large orderlies who had been waiting discreetly down the hall, men on Cashion's payroll, entered the room. Take her to the operating room, Elias commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion. Celeste completely broke down. The elegant facade shattered into a million pieces. She began to scream, to cry, to fight like a wildcat as the orderlies took hold of her arms. No, let me go. You can't do this. Elias, please. She's lying. It's a trick. Her screams echoed down the sterile hallway as she was dragged away, a heartbreaking, horrifying sound. I watched, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. Does this scene look familiar to you, Celeste? I thought, the words a silent taunt. Only when the board strikes your own body do you feel the pain. Elias stood frozen, watching her disappear around the corner, her screams fading. He looked shaken to his core, but his jaw was set with a grim determination. He had made his choice. He had chosen his son. He turned to me, his face pale. "It's done. She'll do it." I just nodded, unable to speak. The victory felt hollow and ash-like. We waited. The surgery, we were told, was a success. Leo's hematopoietic function was recovering beautifully. When the doctor announced the news, I finally allowed myself to breathe a real sigh of relief. My son was safe. The dangerous farce was over. Elias pulled me into a fierce, desperate embrace. "Kira," he murmured into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "He's going to be okay. Our son is going to be fine." I stiffened in his arms. The words felt like a violation. He pulled back, holding my shoulders, his eyes searching mine with a new, terrifying intensity. "It's over now. Divorce Cashion. Come back to me. We can be a family. A real family." I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. The sheer audacity, the staggering lack of self-awareness, left me speechless. After everything, after the betrayal, the humiliation, the attempted organ theft, the public slander, the forced surgery on Celeste, he thought we could just go back? That a few days of worried fatherhood erased 5 years of hell? My anger and resentment were a roaring tide in my veins. I was about to push him away, to unleash the torrent of scorn he so richly deserved, when a blood-curdling scream ripped through the hospital's quiet hum. It came from Celeste's recovery room. Elias and I immediately ran, our previous conversation forgotten. We burst into her room. The scene was one of utter chaos. Celeste was thrashing in her bed, her face contorted in agony and terror. When she saw me, she pointed a trembling, accusatory finger. "Kira Thorne, you've ruined me. Look what you've done. I'm useless. I can't feel my legs." I put on my best face of bewildered grief. "Miss Duboces, what's wrong with you? What are you talking about?" "I'm going to kill you," she shrieked, trying to raise her hand to hit me, but her arm flopped uselessly at her side. Her body below the waist was utterly still. "It's you. You did this. You made me paralyzed." Elias was stunned into silence, his eyes wide with horror. How could this be? A doctor rushed in, his face grave. He checked her charts, examined her briefly. "A rare post-operative complication," he explained, his voice professionally neutral. "An infection settled in a place we couldn't perceive. It's attacked the spinal nerves. I'm so sorry, Miss Duboces. The paralysis appears to be permanent." The corners of my lips threatened to curl up. I fought them down. The doctor, another piece carefully placed by Cashion, was flawless. Celeste broke down into hysterical, gut-wrenching sobs. "Elias, what am I supposed to do now? What am I supposed to do?" Elias walked to her bedside, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He looked from her broken, weeping form to me. I saw the conflict, the guilt, the crushing burden of responsibility. He had done this. His ultimatum had put her here. He pondered for a long, terrible moment. Then he took her limp hand in his. He looked at me, his eyes full of a helpless apology I didn't want, and finally spoke. "Celeste," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Let's get married." The room went silent except for her hiccuping sobs. She gazed up at him, her eyes swimming with tears. "Are really?" He nodded, the movement slow and final. "I'll take care of you. From now on. I promise." I stood there watching the scene unfold. How ridiculous. Just moments ago he was begging me to come back to him. Now he was proposing to the woman he just had forcibly operated on. Elias Thorne was truly, profoundly fickle. But then again, wasn't that his nature? Between me and Celeste, he had always chosen only Celeste. This was just the final confirmation. However, I felt no sadness. No jealousy. Only a cold, clean satisfaction. As everything was going exactly as I had planned. I was quietly preparing to slip from the room, to leave them to their miserable future, when Elias suddenly swayed on his feet. His hand flew to his chest. A violent, racking cough tore through him. He gasped for air, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. Then his eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. The medical alarm was sounded. Doctors and nurses flooded the room, surrounding his prone form. He was rushed to the emergency room, leaving a sobbing Celeste and a stunned me in his wake. The next day the diagnosis came. Terminal lung cancer. Advance. Inoperable. The game had just taken a final, unexpected and brutally perfect turn. The world narrowed to the hushed, beeping silence of the ICU. Elias lay in the bed, a network of tubes and wires connecting him to machines that hissed and whirred, keeping time with his faltering breath. The diagnosis hung over the room like a shroud. Terminal lung cancer. Advance. Inoperable. The doctors gave him months, maybe weeks. The mighty Elias Thorne had been felled not by a business rival but by his own body. I became his primary caretaker. It was the ultimate irony, the final twist of the knife. I moved through the hospital room with a quiet efficiency, fluffing his pillows, adjusting his fore, spoon-feeding him broth. I was the picture of devoted, gentle attentiveness. Every tender touch was a lie. Every soft word was a poison. He watched me with grateful, fading eyes. "You're too good to me, Kira," he'd rasp, his voice a shadow of its former commanding tone. "After everything." "Hush," I'd whisper, dabbing his forehead with a cool cloth. "Don't waste your strength." But inside I was counting the doses. The medicine bottle Cashion had given me was small, innocuous-looking. A carcinogenic drug undetectable in routine tox screens, designed to accelerate what nature had perhaps already started. I mixed it into his water, his food, his medication. A slow, insidious erosion. I was his angel of mercy and his angel of death, all wrapped in one. His health declined day by day. The strong, arrogant man withered into a pale, gaunt version of himself. Knowing his time was short, he called for his lawyers. He signed over everything, his company shares, his properties, his vast fortune, to me and to Leo. He was building a legacy for the son he believed was his, trying to buy a redemption that wasn't for sale. "Kira," he said to me one afternoon, his breath labored. "You must take good care of our boy. Promise me." Tears streamed down my face. They were real tears, but not of grief. They were tears of culmination. I nodded, unable to speak. He examined my face, his gaze unusually gentle, soft with morphine and regret. "Kira, I'm sorry." The words were a ragged whisper. "In this lifetime, I've caused you far too much pain. If there's a next life, I will surely atone for my sins to you." I looked down at him, this broken shell of my tormentor. The corners of my lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "It's okay, Elias," I said, my voice soft as silk. "You've already paid it all in this lifetime." The hospital room became terrifyingly quiet. The steady beep of the heart monitor seemed to amplify. Elias's expression froze. He blinked, slowly, the morphine haze clearing for a moment as his brain struggled to process my words. "Kira," he whispered, confusion clouding his fading eyes. What did you say?" I leaned closer, the gentle caregiver mask melting away to reveal the cold, sharp truth beneath. "There's something I need to tell you, Elias," I said, my voice losing its softness, gaining a new, cutting edge. He looked at me, utterly bewildered. "What is it?" I spoke slowly, savoring each word, each syllable a hammer blow on the remains of his world. "Shli, Leo doesn't have leukemia." His face turned ashen in an instant. The heart monitor beeped faster. He stared at me, his eyes widening as if he were seeing my true face for the very first time. The kind, forgiving woman vanished, replaced by the avenger who had been hiding in plain sight. "You," he choked out, struggling to sit up, his body weak and uncooperative. He collapsed back against the pillows, triggering a fit of violent, wrenching coughs. He clutched his chest, his body convulsing as if his heart and lungs were being torn apart. When the fit subsided, a pool of bright red blood lay starkly in the palm of his hand. I watched coldly, waiting for him to finish. I felt nothing. No pity. No remorse. When he could finally breathe again, gasping and pale, I continued. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small medicine bottle. "Do you know what this is, Elias?" I asked, holding it up so he could see it clearly in the dim light. He stared at it, uncomprehending. "It's a carcinogenic drug," I said, my voice conversational as if discussing the weather. "I've been putting it in your food every day. Slowly eroding your lungs. Helping things along." His eyes bulged. A strangled sound escaped his lips. "Enough," he gasped, trying to stop me, to stop the avalanche of truth that was burying him alive. But I wasn't done. I had saved the best for last. "Oh," I added as if it were a casual afterthought. This medicine, it was given to me by Cashion. The shock on his face morphed into pure, undiluted fury, and then into an agony of disbelief so profound it was almost unbearable to witness. The two betrayals, mine and his rivals, collided inside him, destroying him from the inside out. Why? He finally managed to rasp the word a raw wound. Kira, why would you do this to me? I burst into laughter then. The sound was sharp, shrill, and utterly devoid of warmth, echoing off the sterile walls of the hospital room. Why? I echoed, my laughter cutting off abruptly. I could ask you the same thing, Elias. Why did you force me to donate a kidney to Celeste 5 years ago? Why did you throw me away like I was nothing? A flicker of confusion passed through his eyes. He was trying to grasp it, to understand the chain of cause and effect that had led him here. My voice turned cold, devoid of any humanity. I remember everything, Elias. I was the one who stood by you during your hardest times, when your parents died, when your company was in shambles. I was the one who loved you. And yet this is how you treated me. I stepped closer to the bed, my eyes blazing with a hatred I had nurtured for 5 long years. I got close to you again for one purpose and one purpose only, revenge. I leaned in, my face inches from his. Oh, and I forgot to tell you the best part. I paused, letting the anticipation build. Leo isn't your son. The words landed like a bomb. His whole body went rigid. What? He breathed, the word barely audible. He's an orphan I adopted, I said, each word a deliberate, precise stab. When Cashion saved me from the sea, the child I was carrying, our child, was still alive. I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, quickly extinguished by my next words. I had an abortion, Elias. His eyes were wide, filled with a bottomless pit of suspicion and horror. But, the paternity test, he stammered, clinging to his last shred of evidence. Fake, I revealed, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across my face. All of it. Do you really think I would ever bear a child for a monster like you? People like you, you deserve to have no descendants. You deserve to die alone, your line ended. The words were the final, killing blow. They pierced his heart like a volley of knives. His body began to tremble violently. The light in his eyes, the last stubborn flicker of life and fight, began to fade, guttering out like a candle in the wind. He tried to speak, to curse me, to deny it, but only broken, meaningless syllables escaped his blood-flecked lips. I straightened my collar, my expression settling back into its usual elegance, as if I'd just concluded a business meeting. The assets you so generously left for me and Leo, I said, my voice cool and composed. We'll make good use of them. I'll ensure your fortune does some actual good in the world. Elias suddenly burst into wild, ragged laughter. The laughter was mixed with wet, hacking coughs and broken sobs. It was the sound of a mind and soul completely shattering. Kira, he gasped between fits of coughing. You are too vicious. I glared at him, the flames of my hatred burning bright in my eyes. Me? Vicious. I spat the word. If I hadn't been lucky 5 years ago, I would have already been buried at sea, and Celeste would be walking around with my kidney inside her. You don't get to call me vicious. You created me. I'm sorry. His voice was so weak now it was almost inaudible. The words were meaningless. An automatic reflex. The light in his eyes dimmed, fading into a dull, empty stare. I stood aside, expressionless, as the medical staff rushed in, responding to the flatline alarm from the heart monitor. They worked on him with a frantic, practiced urgency, injecting adrenaline using the paddles. His body jolted on the bed with each shock, a grotesque dance of false life. I watched unmoved. The thrill of vengeance was a cold flood through my veins, leaving me numb and empty. When the doctor finally looked up from the monitor, shook his head and announced the time of death, I simply nodded slightly. It was over. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Hello. Cashion's voice answered on the first ring. It's me, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Our revenge is complete. I hung up without waiting for a response. I took one last look at Elias's lifeless face, frozen in a rictus of pain and shock, and then I turned and walked out of the room. Outside the hospital, the sunlight was bright and warm. It felt alien on my skin. I stood on the steps, taking deep breaths of the fresh air, trying to fill the hollow space inside me. The world kept turning. Cars passed. People laughed. A life had ended and no one knew. A black car pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down. Cashion was behind the wheel. "Kerr," he said. "Get in." I numbly got into the passenger seat. He didn't drive away immediately. He just looked at me, his gray eyes searching my face. "How does it feel?" he asked quietly. "To have your revenge?" I stared out the windshield at the bustling, uncaring city. "Couldn't be more satisfying," I whispered. But the words rang hollow. I finally turned to look at him, a question that had gnawed at me for 5 years finally breaking free. "Cashion, why? Why are you helping me? With your abilities, you could have easily taken revenge on Elias yourself years ago. Why go through this elaborate charade with me?" He was silent for a long moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. The air in the car grew thick. "My aunt," he began, his voice low and devoid of its usual coolness, "was assaulted by Elias's father during a business negotiation. He was never the same. My mother, out of a twisted sense of jealousy and family pride, believed my aunt had somehow invited it. The family rift was immense." I listened stunned. This was the wound I had always sensed. "My revenge wasn't as patient as yours," he continued, a dark smile touching his lips. "I orchestrated a car accident. Elias's parents were killed instantly. I left the Thorn Empire in chaos, expecting it to collapse." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in his eyes. Not cold calculation but a deep, old pain. "But then you appeared. You stayed by his side. You helped him pick up the pieces. You made him stronger than he ever was before." He shook his head, a gesture of rueful admiration. "You were an unforeseen variable. My revenge was incomplete. And I watched you. I saw your strength. I saw your kindness even when he didn't deserve it. And then I saw how he broke you." He paused, his gaze intense. "I couldn't finish him until I first set you free. And then, helping you destroy him became a far more satisfying revenge than any I could have planned alone." The confession hung in the air. He was as much a monster as I had become. We were two broken, vengeful creatures, bound together by a shared history of pain and a mutual target. "What else could it be?" he said softly, answering my initial question. Then he paused and his voice dropped even further. "Because I like you, Kira. Your strength and your fire, they caught my attention long ago." I shook my head, the numbness beginning to recede, replaced by a weary sadness. "Liking me will lead to no good outcome, Cashion. I might have to lock away my heart for the rest of my life. There's nothing left inside me to give." He disagreed, a small, unexpected smile playing on his lips. "It seems quite nice to me," he said, "to silently watch you shine from behind." His words, so simple, so devoid of demand, sparked a tiny warm feeling in my hollow chest. It was a gentle ripple in the stagnant water of my soul. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could try. Maybe there was a future that wasn't built entirely on the ashes of the past. Maybe with him, this complicated, dangerous man who understood my darkness, I could try starting something. But I would never give him my whole heart. I couldn't afford to bet anything ever again. The silence in the car was a living thing, thick with the ghosts of our confessions. Cashion's admission, of murder, of a long, patient obsession with me, should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like a final, grim piece of the puzzle snapping into place. We were not a fairy tale. We were two scarred survivors who had used each other to burn down a shared enemy. There was a brutal honesty in that. He started the car and we drove away from the hospital, from the corpse of my past. I didn't look back. "Where to?" he asked, his voice returning to its usual, collected tone. The moment of vulnerability was over, tucked away behind the mask of Cashion veil, so I didn't know. My apartment, filled with Leo's toys and my designs, suddenly felt like a stage set. The grand revenge was over. The script had ended. What was my motivation now? "Just drive," I whispered, leaning my head against the cool glass of the window. We ended up at the city's highest overlook, a place where the sprawling metropolis glittered below like a carpet of stolen stars. We got out and stood by the railing, the wind whipping my hair. Elias's empire was down there somewhere, now mine in name. But it felt like ashes. "It feels empty," I said aloud, giving voice to the hollowness inside me. Cashion stood beside me, not too close but a solid, present force. "Vengeance is a meal that only fills you while you're eating it. Afterward, You're just left with the taste of blood in your mouth. I glanced at him, surprised by the poetry of the observation. Is that how you felt? After the car accident? He was silent for a moment, watching the lights. No. I felt nothing. That was the problem. With you. I felt something. He didn't look at me. It was messy. Complicated. But it was feeling. His words resonated deep within the numbness. He was right. The past 5 years had been fueled by a fire. A destructive, consuming fire, but a fire nonetheless. Now it was gone and I was left cold. What now, Cashion? I asked, the question sounding small and lost in the vast night. Now, he said, turning to face me, his gray eyes capturing the ambient light. You live. You are a Lara. You are a brilliant designer. You are a mother. You are free. Free. The word was terrifying. The next few weeks were a strange liminal space. I moved through the motions of my life. I picked up Leo from school. I worked on new designs, a collection I tentatively called Embers, pieces forged from reclaimed metal and warm, glowing gemstones, a departure from the icy sharpness of rebirth. I was trying to find a new aesthetic, one not born of pain. The legal transfer of Elias's assets was swift and clinical. I was now one of the wealthiest women in the city. I used the money to quietly establish a charitable foundation in Leo's name, funding medical care for underprivileged children. It was a way to spit on Elias's grave and do some genuine good at the same time. A small, clean part of my soul clung to it. I never saw Celeste again. I heard through the grapevine that she had been moved to a long-term care facility, paralyzed and utterly alone. Elias's promise to care for her had died with him. Her fate was a closed book. I felt no triumph, only a distant pity. She was a ghost, just like the woman I used to be. Cashion was a constant but different. The intensity of our shared mission was gone. He didn't need to be my strategist anymore. Instead, he became a presence. He'd show up at my studio with coffee. He'd take Leo to the zoo, the two of them forming an easy, unexpected bond that made my heart ache with a confused warmth. He was giving me space to breathe, to exist without an agenda. One evening he found me in my studio staring at a blank sketchpad. The pressure to create something new, something that was truly me, was paralyzing. Blocked? He asked, leaning against the doorway. It's all gone, I admitted, throwing my pencil down in frustration. The anger, it was my muse. Now there's just quiet. He came and stood behind me, looking over my shoulder at the empty page. He didn't touch me. Maybe you don't need a muse. Maybe you just need to create. Not for revenge. Not for a story. Just for the joy of it. I'm not sure I remember how, I whispered. Then start with something simple. He reached around me, his arm brushing mine, and picked up a piece of charcoal. He made a single, bold, sweeping line across the page. There. The pressure's off. It's already ruined. I stared at the rogue line and suddenly the spell was broken. I laughed, a real, unforced laugh that surprised us both. I picked up another piece of charcoal and added to his line, then another, letting my hand move without a plan. We stood there together, silently defacing the page with a chaotic, meaningless sketch. It was the most liberating thing I'd done in years. That was the turning point. The Embers collection began to flow. It was softer, more organic, full of curves and warm golds and deep, fiery opals. It was about what remains after the blaze. It was about me. The night of the Embers launch party, I stood before the mirror. I wore a gown of my own design, a shift of liquid gold that seemed to catch the light from within. I looked like a phoenix, not one rising from the ashes in a burst of vengeful flame, but one that had settled, its feathers warm and glowing. Leo, now 5, looked at me with wide eyes. You look like a queen, Mommy. Cashion arrived to pick us up. He stopped short when he saw me, his usual composure slipping for a second. He didn't say anything. He just offered me his arm, his eyes saying everything words could not. The party was a triumph. The pieces sold out within hours. The reviews called it a maturation, transcendence of past trauma. They had no idea how right they were. At the height of the celebration, surrounded by admirers, I saw Cashion across the room. He was talking to a business associate, but his gaze kept finding me. And in that look I saw it all. The shared history, the darkness, the quiet, steady support. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love I'd once felt for Elias. That kind of love had nearly killed me. This was something else. Something quieter. Something that felt like a choice, not a fever dream. Later, as the party wound down, we stood on the balcony much like we had on the overlook weeks before. You did it, he said. You're free. I'm trying to be, I replied, looking out at the city. Then I turned to him. Cashion, this thing between us. What is it? He met my gaze squarely. It's whatever you want it to be, Kira. Can be nothing. Can be a partnership. Can be more. The choice is yours. I told you I'm content to watch you shine. He was giving me the one thing I had never truly had, agency. The power to choose my own path without pressure, without manipulation. I thought of the future. Of Leo growing up. Of building my brand. Of waking up each day without the weight of hatred on my soul. And I thought of waking up next to this complicated, loyal, dangerous man. I'm scared, I admitted, the truest words I'd spoken all night. So am I, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. But I'm more scared of a future without you in it. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers laced through mine, warm and strong. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was a quiet agreement. A beginning. Okay, I said softly. He squeezed my hand. Okay. We stood there in the comfortable silence, watching the city lights. The past was a ghost and the future was an unwritten page. But for the first time in a very, very long time, the blankness didn't scare me. It felt like a promise. I had walked through fire and emerged not as Kira, the victim, or as Alara, the avenger, but as myself. Scarred, yes. Cause always. But whole. And finally, truly free. The phoenix fire had burned out, and in its place I had found not ashes but a steady, enduring warmth. The end.